Good morning, everyone. How are we doing today? It's kind of cold. Like I was over there and I was like, man, I wish it was hot. And it's not that today. I see a lot of vests, so I'm sitting over there shaking and I don't know why. But I'm super excited for you guys to be here today. Who's had fun in this series called Greater Faith? And anybody? Okay, so just so you know, anybody that didn't raise your hand, you just said you haven't had fun going through the Bible in church. Just want to start out there. But it's been fun. You know, this series called Greater Faith, it's been a journey through the book of Hebrews. And if you're new or haven't been here for a couple weeks, what we've done is gone through this letter. And this letter is really a letter of encouragement. The author, we don't really know who it is, but what he's doing is he's encouraging these Jewish Christians that are kind of going through some rough stuff. These people have seen Jesus, they've seen him go to the cross, they've accepted him and said, hey, I'm Team Jesus, but when they do that, it changes some of the things in their life. Some are actually persecuted physically and harmed, and then they have this relationship kind of thing that doesn't go according to plan. Some of their families are shunning them. Culture is shunning them, saying that it's not right. They shouldn't be doing that. And I know for me personally, maybe for some of us here, there are those relationships that kind of go a little sideways, so to speak, when we decide to be on Team Jesus. Anybody had any of those? There's a couple of us. Mine, I can say, are my parents. It's just a different vibe now. But this letter is a letter of encouragement, saying, hey, you know, you need to anchor yourself to Christ and stand firm on his word, stand firm on our beliefs, and that he's going to carry you through anything that we can encounter. And so today we're going to camp out in chapter 11. And chapter 11 is called the Hall of Faith. And when I think of the Hall of Faith, I think of like the Hall of Fame. You know, and me, I played baseball for 13 years. I often had dreams when I was a kid, like, hey, you know what? We are going to be rich and famous, and I'm going to be in the Hall of Fame. I'm going to be on a gold statue. People are going to look at me. I'm going to be awesome. And then reality hit. Apparently, I can't hit. I can't throw. And if you ask my wife, I run like a duck. So there are things that are required to be good at a sport. And that's what the Hall of Fame is. It's all these statistics. All these guys are recognized for their amazing accomplishments on the baseball field. And the cool thing about Hebrews, it's the exact opposite. The author focuses on different people because of their act of faith and how they embody Christ in times of struggles and in times when things don't go according to plan. So a little bit on this is there's 17 people that are going to be named by name in the Hall of Faith, and there's going to be a bunch of like references to people that might not necessarily be named. And the cool thing is these aren't just these perfect people that are awesome and do everything according to plan. These are average people like you and me that make mistakes, that kind of go off the path a little bit. But the cool thing is they are faithful to Christ. They are faithful when things go sideways. And that's why they're honored in the Hall of Faith. And that's why they're highlighted by this author, because of their faith and their obedience, not because of their works that they did. So you guys ready to jump in? Yep. All right, here we go. So in chapter 11, verse 1 through 7, it says, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Remember that's key, guys. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. By faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith, Abel still speaks, even though he is dead. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. he could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear, built an ark to save his family. By his faith, he condemned the world and became heirs of the righteousness that is in keeping with faith. So I want to highlight there's these three types of faith that we see in the Bible. The first is saving faith. You know, in Ephesians it says, by faith you have been saved. This is the type of faith that every one of us has when we put our trust and faith in Jesus and know that he is the one that created the earth. The second type of faith is called the gift of faith. And this is actually a spiritual gift that some people have. Now, you know these type of people. There's one type of person that the world could be at, what's going to happen? Everything's going crazy. And then there are these people that have the gift of faith in that same situation. They're like, oh, it's going to be okay. People are going to get us through. We'll be fine. I don't know about you, but I do not. Those people annoy me. And like I said, it's okay. I do not have that gift of faith. But you know, for someone to be so calm in a situation that's so crazy, scary, it's just weird. So you know, everybody's getting that person in their mind right now. They're like, okay, when the world's coming to an end, these are the people I want to go hang out with because they're calm. It is not me. And it is definitely not my wife. So that's the second type. Now the third type is called living faith. And this is what we're all called to do. So if we have saving faith, then we have to have living faith. And what that is just what we do on a daily basis. This can be in our schools. This can be in our work. It's sitting there and allowing us to just live out faith the best of our ability and letting God do the rest. But sometimes I feel that we get in our own way. And in a small example of saving faith, I want us to pay attention to this video up here.
Okay, close.
Jump now!
Marco, I will catch you, and I will never let you go again.
Now, yes, it's a cartoon. But how easy would it be if that's how easy faith was for us? If someone just says, I'm going to catch you, and we jump. We get in our own way. And I think that's a good encouragement for us today is be vulnerable and don't be scared about taking those risks and making faith so simple that even a kid's cartoon can make it seem so easy. So now we talk about three different people that are named by name in verse 4. So we start off with Enoch. Or excuse me, we don't start off with Enoch. We start off with Abel. And everybody knows who Cain and Abel are, I hope. They are the sons of Adam and Eve. And what it alludes to here is it talks about the type of sacrifice that Abel gives. And it says in scripture that God approved of Abel's sacrifice, but not of Cain's sacrifice. And we don't really know why. It doesn't specifically say why God favored Abel's instead of Cain's. And there are some different ways later on in scripture that say because Abel was seen as a righteous man. And one of the cool things I realized when researching this passage is Abel was not in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve had already been kicked out of the garden, so he hadn't seen the beauty and the wonders of the Garden of Eden, yet he still was righteous. He was still seen as righteous. He was still seen as a person that trusted and followed God, so much so that he would be listed in the Hall of Faith. And I think it's just amazing to think it wasn't anything that he saw that made him do that. It was just the type of person he was. Second person we highlight is Enoch, and he's kind of a mystery man in the Old Testament. He's the son of Methuselah, which I think is funny because as you spell that last name, it's S-E-L-A-H. Ha, I got you. And Enoch lived to be 365 years old. That like blows my mind. But the cool thing about him is that it says at 65, he had an encounter with God and walked throughout the rest of his life with faith. Now, two things. One, he didn't have to experience death because he was such a righteous person. God just took him. There was no pain, which first of all, I want to check that box too, like take me that way. And second of all, it happened at age 65. So 65 years, he went one way, but he had an encounter with God and decided to walk a different way the rest of his life. And I think that's a huge encouragement for us today. I waited till I was 35. But it doesn't matter your age, because no matter what, when you take that step and you take that faith journey and say, hey, I'm Team Jesus, God's gonna use you to grow his kingdom. And it doesn't matter how old you are, he's always available. Yeah. And the third person we talk about is Noah. And everybody knows what Noah did. Noah built a boat. But the thing that we need to see is he built this boat, and it says he did it based on things that had not yet been seen. And there's some commentaries that say that at this time, rain was not a thing. Like nobody understood what rain was. There's some that believe that the world was kind of like a rainforest, and it would kind of, water would come up from the ground, and that's how the plants and stuff were watered. So Noah's sitting there telling these people, he's building this boat for 2 years, saying, hey, rain's gonna come from the sky, there's gonna be a flood, and I need you to get on this boat to be saved. And yeah, the world was a messed up place. But I often ask myself, if the roles were, the same today, and I hadn't seen rain, and this was not something that I had seen, would I get on the boat? And there's only 8 people that got on the boat, which was Noah's family. My question for you today is, what would you do? You haven't seen it, but you're being asked to be obedient. Would you do it? Is that what faith is? And I think it's important to highlight the definition of faith. And it says right here that faith is the confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Each of these 3 men weren't perfect. They were imperfect. They all made mistakes. But the one thing we can take away from them, and I want you to write this down if you can, is that faith is not a feeling. Faith is an action. Faith is a verb. It requires us to do something. Enoch followed God. Abel offered a sacrifice, and Noah built an ark. Faith is something that we have to do. We have to play our part. We can't just sit around. We play our part and we allow God to do what God can do. But we still have to play our part. We have to do and hold up our end of the bargain. And now as we continue in verse 8, it says, by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land, like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him. Did I say heirs? Who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looked forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he whose good is dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and as countless as the sand on the seashore. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who has embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. Abraham reasoned that God could raise the dead, and so in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. So now it's Abraham's turn, and we highlight him with these 3 tests of faith that he has to experience. And the first is this test of going where he hadn't been before. There wasn't a lot of direction. There wasn't a lot of insight, just, I need you to go, and he picks up and goes. It's an encouragement. I remember when I went back to school a couple years ago, and when that was placed on my heart, my first thought of was, did you see me in high school? And I'm pretty sure you got the wrong person. And I tried to fight it a little bit until I just turned and said, okay, if this is where you're really calling me to go, God, then I'm going to go. And luckily, he has blessed me with still continuing to go to school. And I, in fact, actually get better grades now than I did in high school, which is really a weird thing. But it's something that only can happen when we sit there and we listen to God and we allow him to take care of the rest. And I think that's an encouragement for us today. And I really feel that this is going to speak to a couple of us in here. What's that next nudge that God's calling you to? What's that next step that you're just kind of teetering on, like, I don't know, should I do this? Maybe it's a new job. Maybe it's a new relationship. Maybe it's a promotion. We have to allow God to work. And when we're obedient and we say yes, like Abraham does, he can sit there and move. And we're never going to know what happens until we say yes. The second test of faith that we see is the birth of Isaac from Sarah. And when I say they're old, I mean like these people were old. Sarah was 90 and Abraham was about 100. Yet they still had this miracle baby. And I kind of feel bad for Isaac a little bit because like I don't know how much fun and like stuff he got to do and run around and play with dad, because if dad's 100, like he's not going to be running around playing. I don't know. I'm just thinking in my head, like, how much fun could that have been to go play catch in the yard? I mean, he might not have been able to throw too far or chase him or run, but it's just one of those things that kind of I ponder with a little bit. Anyway, side note, I don't know why I said that. Step of faith number 3 for Abraham, and this one's kind of tough to wrap your head around. I remember the very first time I read this in Genesis, and I was like, did I just read that right? Because you don't often think that, hey, guess what's going to be in the Bible? I'm going to tell you to sacrifice your kid, and dad's going to be like, yep, I'm on board with that. But he does. And on one hand, it goes both ways, because on one, I can't fathom doing that. One, even though there might be times, now I've never thought about sacrificing my girls, but like there's times where you just want to, like maybe underneath like a different layer, like punch them or something, not all the way up here. But like think of what kind of faith that is, because he was going to do it until God intervened and stepped in and was like, no, we're not going to sacrifice your son. But it even says in scripture that he had such faith because he believed that God would bring him back from the dead, because the descendants were going to come through Isaac. So there's no way that he can be dead, right? But he was going to do it. And I'm not saying that we have to have that type of faith with, trying to sacrifice our kids, but what kind of faith and obedience can just say, I know what you said is true, and I'm going to anchor to that. So you said to do this, I'm going to do it, because I know that you're going to work everything out for my good and for your plan. And I'm not going to ask if anybody would put themselves in that situation, because I don't want to hear the answer to if you would make that call on your kid. But it's just something to think about when it comes to that type of faith. Are you that obedient? Because I don't know that I am when it would come to that extreme. But again, like we talked about with the video, it's just God says this. I know what he says is true. Let's go. And now we're going to move forward into 20 through 30. And it says, by faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshiped as he leaned on the top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions concerning the burial of his bones. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born, because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God, rather to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. And by faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He preserved because he was him who was invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and the application of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By faith the people passed through the Red Sea as in dry land. But when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell after the army had marched around them for 7 days. Now we see some more people mentioned in these verses. And it alludes to the first being Isaac. So obviously he didn't die. But what we highlight here is that Isaac blessed his sons. And that right before he died, he blessed Joseph's sons, which would be his grandchildren. So these people in the Hall of Faith, we can call them Hall of Faithers. I thought about that one right now. We put them in there because they bless their kids. They bless their generations. And they make it an important part of their life. And I'm going to highlight a couple things that we need to do, or I think we should do, on how we can bless our kids today. And I want you to write them down if you want. You don't have to. You don't have to do what I say. But first, we can pray with them and for them. The second is we can speak words of affirmation. You know, the Harvard School of Business did a study, and it linked to kids were more apt to be successful if they were spoken words of affirmation over and over and over again. And unfortunately, this is one of those things where I have to look in the mirror and say, am I doing a good job? Because whether I'm joking or not, if I tell Peyton, hey, that's a stupid idea, or I tell Taylor, that was dumb, why'd you do that? Am I building my kids up, or am I tearing them down? What are they gonna remember? And it's in those times I can always sit there when they get a good report card or they do something good. Awesome, that's so great, that's awesome. But what about when they make a mistake? What am I gonna say then? And that's something that I need to work at. And I could be the only one in the room, I could not be the only one in the room, but it's something that I think we need to be aware of because our kids are always watching. And how we treat them and how we talk to them is gonna be something that they're gonna do when they become parents. The third thing we can do for them is speak to their future and show them value. This one's also tough for me. We can listen to them. My 14-year-old is not, we've told her she does not have an opinion until she's 18, but maybe I need to do a better job of listening. It's tough to listen to our kids because we seem to think we know it all, right? And the fifth thing we can do is we can have them in church. You know, I know there's a lot of different things that can keep us from church, and that's perfectly okay with sports and, you know, traveling sports and traveling events. That's okay. But when we're able to, when we're available to, we need to make church attendance a priority. Because if we want our kids and our grandkids to spend a life in church, we need to show them what that looks like now. You know, we talk about two more people that are listed by name. You know, we talk about Joseph. And Joseph, not the Joseph of Joseph and Mary, this is the Joseph of the Old Testament, the dude that had the colorful jacket. And I feel bad for him because he lived such a life of character and integrity, but it always seems like he's in the wrong place at the wrong time. You know, his brothers sold him into slavery. He was in prison for years, but he never wavered. He always sat there and put his attention and focus on God. And it even says that he's highlighted here because of one thing. Of all the amazing things he did, he wanted to be buried in Israel, not in Egypt. His whole life had been in Egypt for the most part, but he wanted to be buried where his heart was, which was Israel. And then we talk about Moses and how he sits there and he's able to take the Israelites out of slavery and take them to the promised land. And Moses could have had a very different life. He was the adopted grandson of the Pharaoh. So he could have had this life of luxury. He could have had this life of prominence, but his heart broke for his people. And it doesn't say exactly how he knew that those were his people, but his just heart broke for the way they were treated. And so much so that he sits there and he helps his people be freed, and they go to the Red Sea. And even there we highlight the Israelites that came with him. I like to think that they went through like the first aquarium, because he holds his staff up and all of a sudden the walls go up. And there's fish, and if there were sharks, like I don't know if I'd go, but there's fish and water on both sides, and they walk through, and it says they walk through on dry land. So aquarium makes a little sense, but again, how would we do that? Would we have the faith to walk through something we can't see, because magically I'm gonna make this sea break in half and you're gonna walk through on dry land? The Hebrews 11 offers us a lot of examples on faith and all these different examples on what people do when things are tough. And it's a good reminder for us today to anchor to what we know to be true. It doesn't say it's gonna be perfect. It doesn't say that things are always gonna go according to plan. But what it says is that these Bible heroes had the same kinds of situations, the same kind of struggles, but were able to anchor to one thing, and that's Christ. And I'm gonna end with a quote, and I didn't know if I was gonna end with this, because I went to an event a week ago, and I heard this new song, and it just kept playing in my head week in and all week, and I was like, why? Like, I don't understand it. But it's fitting, because I think it makes sense, especially when we talk about faith. So I'm gonna read this quote, and I really feel that this is gonna speak to some of us. It says, everything is gonna be okay. It won't always be this way. At my worst when it hurts, I won't be afraid. Sometimes faith has growing pains. Everything is going to be okay. This wall makes sense someday. At my worst when it hurts, I won't be afraid. Sometimes faith has growing pains. What do you do when you have a growing pain? Now, when I was a kid, I actually remember what growing pains are, and those were horrible because it never seemed like the ice or the heat would ever fix. But when we have a struggle in our life, when we have a situation that we can't understand, what do? We're supposed to pray. We're supposed to worship. We're supposed to give it to the one person that can do it, that can fix it, to the one person that created the earth like that. So we're gonna worship to end today, and I encourage you all, whatever growing pain you're going through, whatever season that isn't making sense, I encourage you to come forward, and we're gonna have the prayer team come up and let people pray with you as we worship. Living faith is believing that God's gonna do what he said he's gonna do. And if you have saving faith, then we have to have living faith. And living faith doesn't mean just celebrating when things are awesome. We want that, he wants that, but he also wants everything. And he wants you to give it to him so that he can work. Remember, faith isn't supposed to be this hard thing. And like in the video again, what if it was just as simple as just talking to him and saying, yep, God wants this, so I'm gonna go.